So when science fiction first came out, if you guys remember, science fiction, and I hope you know this, there are a lot of reasons for this, but science fiction was, it was deeply, deeply suspect for most Americans. And the term science fiction, of course, doesn't even come into vogue until the early 1950s, and there were all kinds of competing names for it, but it was everywhere. And so two things I want to say about it as I hand these around, and then we'll talk about Ballad of the White Horse. But the two things I want to say are, very importantly, in the first half of the 20th century, if you were Catholic or Jewish, you would not be allowed in any way, shape, or form to be in major publishing. It was closed doors for anyone who was Jewish or Catholic. And so what happens is there's a whole alternative form of publishing that comes out, mostly in New York, but you'll also see it in Los Angeles as well, in which Jews will typically start printing presses, and then they'll often hire Catholic artists to write for them or to draw for them. And so that's why when we look at pulp, it originally was considered as this very low-class form of literature because it was almost always associated with immigrants. And rightly so, it was a coming out of immigrants. And it's also, if you guys have ever wondered, when you look at Hollywood movies, why so many film directors and movie producers are Jewish. It's outrageous, overwhelming how much of Hollywood is Jewish and how many of the actors are Catholic. It's because Hollywood was also an alternative venue at the time that was competing with East Coast publishing. And so you find, and it's still true to this day, in comic books especially, comics are still often drawn by Latin American artists and often written by Jews. Is a very typical thing, and you see that as a part of the immigration pattern. So that's the first thing I want to say about science fiction. It's almost always identified with immigrants, and that won't change until Ray Bradbury and C.S. Lewis write science fiction, and they make it respectable for the mainstream at that point. But the other thing is that almost all science fiction was published on what was called pulp. That is, it's on the cheapest newsprint possible. And so I'm going to pass these around, but I'd rather you guys not take them out of the bag because they're not in great shape. But you can see here by the corners how cheap the paper is. And it's amazing. These won't last long. If you go out to the West Coast, if you go out to Arizona, if you go to Nevada, and you go to a used bookstore, you can find piles of pulp magazines. You don't find them in places like Ohio because the humidity's too high and it destroys the paper. So it's only in places like the desert. And by me even bringing these into Michigan, I've probably ruined their chances of surviving at all just because of the humidity here. And so, but keeping them in the plastic will help. But you'll see it's on very cheap paper. But you guys are welcome to take this one out. So the small one, you're welcome to take out and look at. But I'm going to start with him, Hugh, so you can read for us, right, Drew, because you're up.
Yeah.
Right. So, but yeah, look at those. And again, the one that you can take out, that's a more modern one. That's from 1963. But you'll see that Ray Bradbury's right on the cover. And you can still get these. There's still pulp magazines if you go to Barnes & Noble. In fact, the magazine, one of the magazines that I'm passing around there, is still in print. And it's on modern paper now, so you don't have to worry about the damaging the paper, but it's still there. But I want you guys, I guess as a third thing, to look at the covers as well. And the covers are meant to be lurid. They're meant to, they always have scantily clad women, and they're meant for 13 and 14-year-old boys to buy. So you'll see that as a part of pulp and science fiction as well. Okay, Drew, are you ready to finish us on the Ballad of the White Horse and our semester-long reading project?
Yes. Are we on over our White Souls also?
I have the no.
Okay.
I think we're before that. I had marked that it's then Alfred smiled, and the smile of him was like the sun, because I think Hugh didn't. You finished the speech, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we've done the speech.
Where I stopped. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Perfect. Just wanted to make sure. Then Alfred smiled, and the smile of him was like the sun for power. But he only pointed, bade them heed, those peasants of the Berkshire breed, who pluck the old horse of the weed, as they pluck it to this hour. Will he part with the weeds forever, or show daisies to the door, or will you bid the bold grass go and return the more? So ceaseless and so secret, thrive tear and theft set free, treason and shame shall come to pass, while one weed flowers in a morass, and like the stillness of stiff grass, the stillness of tyranny. Over our White Souls also, wild heresies and high, wave prouder than the plums of grass, and sadder than their sigh. And I go riding against the raid, and ye know not where I am. But ye shall know in a day or year, when one green star of grass grows here, chaos has charged you, charger and spear, battle axe and battering ram. And those skies alter and empires melt, this word shall still be true. If ye would have the horse of old, scour ye the horse anew. One time I followed a dancing star that seemed to sing and nod, and ring upon earth all evil's knell. But now I wot, if ye scour not well, red rust shall grow on God's great bell, and grass in the streets of God. Ceased Alfred, and above his head, the grand green domes, the downs, showed the first legions of the press, marching in haste and bitterness, for Christ's sake in the crowns. Beyond the caverns of Colan, past Eldred's by the sea, rose men that owned King Alfred's rod from the windy wastes of Exe untrod, or where the thorn of the grave of God burns over Glastonbury. Far northward and far westward, the distant tribes drew nigh. Plains beyond plains, fell behind fell, that a man at sunset sees so well, in the tiny colored towns that dwell in the corners of the sky. But dark and thick as thronged the host, with drum and torch and blade, the still-eyed king sat pondering, as one that watches a live thing. That's the scoured chalk, and he said, though I give this land to Our Lady, that help me in Ethelney, though lordlier trees and lustier sod and happier hills hath no flesh trod, than the garden of the Mother of God between Thames side and the sea. I know that weeds shall grow in it faster than men can burn, and though they scatter now and go, in some far century sad and slow, I have a vision, and I know the heathen shall return. They shall not come with worships, they shall not waste with brands, but books be all their eating, and ink be on their hands. Not with the humor of hunters, or savage skill in war, but ordering all things with dead words, strings shall they make of beasts and birds, and wheels of wind and star. They shall come mild as a monkish clerk, with many a scroll and pen, and backward shall ye wander and gaze, desiring one of Alfred's days, when pagans still were men. The dear sun dwarfed of dreadful suns, like fiercer flowers on stalk, earth lost in little like a pea, in high heaven's towering forestry, these be the small weeds ye shall see, crawl, covering the chalk. But though they bridge St. Mary's sea, or steal St. Michael's wing, though they rear marvels over us, greater than great Virgilius, wrought for the Roman king, by this sign you shall know them, the breaking of the sword. And man no more a free knight, that loves or hates his lord. Ye, this shall be the sign of them, the sign of the dying fire, and man made like a half-wit, that knows not of his sire. What though they come with scroll and pen, and grave as a shaven clerk? By this sign you shall know them, that they ruin and make dark. By all men bound to nothing, being slaves without a lord, by one blind idiot, world obeyed, too blind to be abhorred, by terror in the cruel tales of curse and bone and kin, by weird and weakness winning, a curse from the beginning, by detail of the sinning and denial of the sin, by thought a crawling ruin, by life a leaping mire, by a broken heart in the breast of the world, in the end of the world's desire, by God and man dishonored, by death and life made vain, know ye the old barbarian, the barbarian come again. When is great talk of trend and tide, and wisdom and destiny, hail that undying heathen that is sadder than the sea, and what wise men shall smite him, or the cross shall stand up again, or charity or chivalry, my vision saith not, and I see no more, but now ride doubtfully to the battle of the plain. In the grass edge of the great down was cut clean as a lawn, while the levies thronged from near and far, from the warm woods of the western star, and the king went out to his last war on a tall gray horse at dawn. And news of his far-off fighting came slow and brokenly, from the land of the East Saxons, from the sunrise and the sea, from the plains of the white sunrise, in sad St. Edmund's crown, where the pools of Essex pale and gleam out beyond Linden town. In mighty and doubtful fragments, like faint and fabled wars, climb the old hills of his renown, where the bald brow of White Horse Dawn down is close to the cold stars. But away in the eastern places, the wind of death walked high, and the raid was driven athwart the raid. The sky reddened and the smoke swayed, and the tall gray horse went by. The gates of the great river were breached as with a barge. The walls sank crowded, said the scribes, and high towers populous with tribes seemed leaning from the charge. Smoke, like rebellious heavens rolled, curled over colored flames, mirrored in monstrous purple dreams in the mighty pools of Thames. Loud was the war on Linden wall, and loud in Linden gates, and loud the sea kings in the cloud broke through their dreaming gods, and loud cried on their dreadful fates. And all the while, on White Horse Hill, the horse lay long and wan. The turf crawled and the fungus crept, and the little sorrel, while all men slept, unwrought the work of man. With velvet finger, velvet foot, the fierce soft mosses then crept on the large white commonweal. All folk had striven to strip and peel, and the grass, like a great green witch's wheel, unwound the coils of men. And clover and silent thistle throve, and buds burst silently. With little care, the Thames Valley, and what things there might be, that away on the widening river, in the eastern plains for crown, stood up in the pale purple sky one turd of smoke like ivory, and the smoke changed, and the wind went by, and the king took Linden town.
All right, great job, Drew. Really good. Okay, you wanna take first comment on it? Thoughts for this? Again, think about tone, words, philosophy, connecting it to anything we talked about before. Cadence.
Yeah, it's interesting to contrast this kind of prophecy of the next barbarians in the next battle with like the barbarians they just beat in the war they just waged, because they win that with like they win by like putting the cross on him, on the barbarians, and it doesn't seem like there's
Excuse me.
like it doesn't seem like there's as much kind of Christian hope in the future. I think Alfred says or in what wise men shall smite him, or the cross stand up again, or charity or chivalry, my vision saith not. He doesn't see as much the I guess the Christian hope that caused the English to go out to that war with the motivation they had to fight this time.
Yeah. No, that's really good, Drew. Good. What else, guys? Anybody have any comments on this? Especially, just tie it all together now. We've spent a semester thinking about this, and here we are on the end, right at our last day. So what are we to make of this with Alfred and with what Chesterton is doing? And why this sudden break at the end that Drew pointed out, that now we're prophesying into the 20th century itself? And does it seem fair on Chesterton's part? Jonathan, please.
There was a line about, sorry, I neglected to bring mine today.
That's okay.
If you seek the white horse, scour or something about him instead. What was the line?
That was 125.
Yeah, if we would have the horse of old, scour ye the horse anew. I think that embodies a sentiment of conservatism we've been touching on all semester. That if we truly want to conserve anything, it has to be a new version of what was old, something like that.
Okay, right, so we've definitely got that element of continuity that matters. And we're looking, and notice what he says. I mean, it's pretty clear. Chesterton is telling us we don't want revolution, but we do want reform, right? We constantly need reform. We should be reforming all the time, but we should be extremely leery of revolution. So what happens then in the 20th century? Did you guys catch? And remember when he writes this is 1908. So we haven't had World War I yet. Yeah, we haven't seen the rise of fascism or of communism, none of that. So who do you think Chesterton's responding to? And it's probably, if you feel like you're going to state it and it'll be the obvious answer, you're probably right. So who's he responding to here?
The progressives or Karl Marx or something.
Yeah, so definitely the progressives, but I would say even more than Marx, he's challenging Nietzsche here, right? There's a strong element, especially when you think about the nihilism of Nietzsche, that he's going against. So let's just break this down for a moment. Let's look at what we have. So again, the part that Jonathan just read, and though skies alter and empires melt, this word shall still be true. If we would have the horse of old, scour ye the horse anew. And notice the language that Chesterton is using there, the idea of the word. And remember, we've seen constantly through the whole Ballad of the White Horse the reference to the word. And the word, of course, the proper word is Christ. But remember what Mary told us. Out of the mouth of the Mother of God, like a little word go I. So Chesterton is also really commenting here on the nature of humanity. And we are, for all intents and purposes, we are nothing unless we recognize the Christ within each one of us, right? We're absolutely nothing. And that I think is just critically and in part of Christian humanism. We cannot understand the humane without the Christian, right? Maybe we can understand the Christian without the humane, though I'm skeptical of that. But I don't think we can recognize the humane without the Christian. And again, think about even the incarnation, where God takes on our image rather than us taking on God's image. And that, we've been playing with this all semester. What do we mean by Christian humanism? What is this idea? And it does seem that there's something profound, more than seem, there's something deeply profound about God accepting our image and then getting on the cross and dying in our image, right? And think about what we talked about when we were looking at the four quartets and other things. Imagine Jesus as fully God is taking on all the sins of the universe, but as fully man, he's just been betrayed by 11 of his 12 closest male friends, right? So there's something deeply painful about that, but that happens to Jesus as fully man, not just to Jesus as fully God. And that's where we have to be very careful when we say, and I think, and I'll say this, and you guys can correct me if I'm wrong, I think one of the great errors of Catholicism is that we often focus too much on Jesus as fully man. And I think one of the great errors of Protestantism is they often focus too much on Jesus as fully God. And I think that it really takes a balance of both of those things to understand the nature of Christ and the nature of the Trinity. And of course, I'm exaggerating to a certain extent on both Catholics and Protestants. But if we fall into an error, that's our error, right? That we each do. And so I think we have to find a kind of balance in that. But think then what happens here, and this for me and Hugh, this is on page 166. But think about how we see what the Virgin Mary stands for. But dark and thick as thronged the host with drum and torch and blade, the still-eyed king still pondering, as the one that watches a living thing, the scoured chalk. So here he is, waiting battle, looking at the white horse, but what does he say? Though I give this land to Our Lady, that help me in Athelney, though lordlier trees and lustier sod, and happier hills hath no flesh trod, than the garden of the Mother of God, between the Thames side and the sea. And you think about that honor given to Mary here as the new tabernacle, right? She is the one who for 9 months keeps the new covenant in her womb. And so we should respect her. We don't want to worship her, but we should respect her immensely for being the new Eve, for being the new tabernacle. But then look what he does to change this. And this is the prophecy that we get from Alfred. I know that weeds shall grow in it faster than men can burn. And though they scatter now and go, in some far century sad and slow, I have a vision, and I know the heathen shall return. They shall not come with worships, they shall not waste with brands, but books be their eating, and ink be on their hands. And you can imagine, they're tattooed with their own words, not the word, but with their own words. They're tattooed, and they're drowning in their ink. These are the bureaucrats and the ideologues and the progressives. They're not men. They're sub-men, if anything. They're not human. If they were human, they would recognize Christ as king. They're not human. They're like apes. They're very intelligent apes. And they don't understand humanity. And so we'll long for Guthrum. Wouldn't it be great if we stood before a Mark Kaltoff-like figure? Wouldn't that be great? That would be a real battle. But some guy in his cubicle who eats words? No, those aren't men. They're barely human at all. And that's what Chesterton is really getting at here. So yeah, we have to kill the pagans. We're in open battle with them. There's no question about that. Guthrum's got to go. But we still respect him because there's still something profound about his paganism that's far better than our neo-paganism, right? That was at least real. And yeah, they worshipped Odin, and that was wrong. But better to worship Odin than worship nothing at all, right? Does that, I don't know if you guys agree with me on this, or if you agree with what Chesterton is saying, but there is something deeply disappointing about people who just believe nothing. They're just nihilists. They worship the abyss, and they don't even know what it is. And, I not to preach here too much, but, think about how many people we meet. Oh, I define my own existence. I say who I am. They don't have a clue who they are. They don't know their gender. They don't know what they are. They've tattooed themselves and pierced themselves until they're just nothing. And that's deeply, deeply depressing. And that's what we see here. At least Guthrum knew who he was, right? And he was a man, and he died like a man. And that's what Alfred is dealing with here. So think about this next line. Not with the humor of hunters or savage skill in war, but ordering all things with dead words. Strings shall they make of beasts and birds, and wheels of wind and star. They shall come mild as monkish clerks. Think about Dr. Fauci, one of the most evil men of our generation, a monkish clerk. It's all he is, an empty suit. And backward shall ye turn and gaze, desiring one of Alfred's days, when pagans still were men. Right? Don't we long for that? We long for our enemy to stand for something, not to stand for nothing. And so there we have that. And again, this is why, I love this whole poem. But for me, it's Chesterton in 1908 who's playing the prophet. You guys realize this is the new enemy. Bland, tapioca, conformist, believes in nothing, barely human. Barely human. And yet, what are we called to do? Even in the weakest nihilist, we are called to see the image of Christ in them. And man, is that hard. It is so hard. And yet we are absolutely called to do that in every way. So again, think about this. Jump down a couple of stanzas here. Ye that shall be the sign of them, the sign of the dying fire, and men made like a half-wit that knows not of his sire. What though they come with scroll and pen and grave as a shaven clerk, by this sign you shall know them, that they ruin and make dark. By all men bond to nothing, capital N, nothing. This is what the devil is. The devil is nothing. He has lost. He is the absence of grace. And that's what they worship. They don't know that, but that's all they're worshiping. They are worshiping nothing, being slaves without a lord. By one blind idiot, the world obeyed, too blind to be abhorred. Right? And again, I hope you guys see, this is genius on Chesterton's part. This is absolute genius. He has just told us about every Satanist, every Nazi, every progressive, every communist. He's just nailed it. That's who these people are. They eat words. And yet, still, they are made in the image of the Word. And so we have to call to them over and over and over again. And so I remind you guys, one of my, and I mentioned this earlier in the semester, one of my all-time favorite speeches is C.S. Lewis's speech to the University of Cambridge in 1954, in which he says, I would love it if the pagans still sacrificed a bull in front of 10 Downing Street. Wouldn't that be great? If they were really pagans and they actually sacrificed a bull and watched which way the blood ran, at least I could challenge them, my God to their God. But our modern pagans believe nothing. And so how can you challenge them? You can't challenge them because they don't know who they are. And they have no root. And that, guys, again, think about everything we've talked about in this class. This is modernism. And this is postmodernism. My idea is as good as your idea. Bull. Absolute bull. In no way could my idea be as good as your idea. We have Christ, and we have all of the great figures in history to draw upon. And so we can't just define it by me, Brad. We can't do that. We have to define it by something greater than ourselves. So that's what I wanted you guys to get out of this with Ballad of the White Horse. And again, maybe it's a little too pro-pagan at times. Maybe it's not quite as comfortable as we'd like it in its Orthodox Christianity, but it's still an incredible challenge to the modern world and a reminder that we are words. We're not the Word, but we are still made in the image of the Word, and therefore we must behave in a proper Christ-like fashion. And that's hard. It's so hard, but we're called to do it over and over again. Okay, well, do you guys have any final thoughts on Ballad? I know we're at the end of the semester, we're tired, but man, it's good stuff. So, any final, Hugh?
Well, I was just going to say, to be fair to Nietzsche, I think Nietzsche's Revenge, the kind of exercise of the will, the will to power, has a much greater affinity with the kind of pagan, the Danish pagans than these clerks. Like, if anything, Nietzsche would be probably just as not to defend Nietzsche necessarily.
No, please do.
Would be just as disgusted with the monkish clerk. That to me sounds a lot like The Last Man. Someone who's sitting at a desk rather than this kind of, this gray man that he is advocating for. So, I guess that's just to say, like, it is an even more servile and kind of repulsive form of humanity than what Nietzsche is advocating for.
Yeah.
I guess I don't know who the best figure we would associate with that kind of, person is, but your understanding resonates with me, and I do think there's the one passage where he says, by detail of the sinning and denial of the sin. If that's not kind of beyond good and evil, denial of the sin, then I don't know what is. So I definitely see the kind of Nietzschean resonance.
Oh, absolutely. And Hugh, I'm totally with you. If into this room right now walked Darwin and Marx and Freud and Nietzsche, I would shake Nietzsche's hand. I would not shake the other hands.
Yeah.
But absolutely. So again, Nietzsche may be wrong, but and think about Christ, right? Think about what he said. The lukewarm I spit out, right? I spit out. It is better to be evil than lukewarm. At least you stand for something. Of course, it's much better to be good, but it is still better to be evil than lukewarm. And I think that's so important for what we're talking about here. Okay, good, guys. Well, anything else? Thanks, you, for that. Okay, last thing I want to talk about. I'm going to do a couple of readings for you guys. When I've taught this class, and I've taught it about every 3 years, I teach this class, and have since I first got here, and it's changed its name many, many, many times, but it'll probably stick with Christian humanism now for quite a while. But I have often taught, rather than teaching Canticle for Leibowitz, I have taught Martian Chronicles by Ray Bradbury. And it's a toss-up for me because I love Canticle. And I'm still hoping you guys have some thoughts about Canticle. And again, my question I asked you guys, why did I assign it? What does it tell us about this class? But I want to make sure that we have some discussion of Bradbury as well. Because for me, and Bradbury is complicated in terms of his religion. He is raised as a Baptist, but he rejects that. It never sticks with him at all. And, think about Bradbury. I don't know. Let me just ask you guys, how many of you have read Bradbury? If any, okay. So 2 of you have not. Okay, let me give you this background about Bradbury. So if we're thinking about American literature and where people fit in, we would absolutely say, and I think anyone in the English department would agree with me on this, that if we're talking about the master of the short story, probably Bradbury would be in the top 1 or 2 in American history. I'm not sure anybody has mastered the short story. He's good at novels too. Fahrenheit 451, Something Wicked This Way Comes, Dandelion Wine. These are very important novels, but they're not natural to him. Bradbury's a short story writer. That's what he's really, really good at. And if we want to put him in a kind of category and a line, we would basically say there's Washington Irving, there's Edgar Allan Poe, there's Nathaniel Hawthorne, there's Willa Cather, and then there's Ray Bradbury. if we're talking about just prose stylists who really are dealing with the kind of odd, and Melville as well. But remember Melville, his short stories are okay. It's his long fiction that matters so much. Hugh?
What do you think about Flannery O'Connor?
Well, I would put Flannery O'Connor after Bradbury, because Bradbury really makes his splash about a decade before O'Connor does. But I would definitely place her, like if I kept the lineage going, she would be next for me. What about for you, Hugh?
Oh no, I mean, I just having read a few of the short stories, I guess I just had the chronology a little mixed up. For some reason, I thought she was slightly before him.
No,
that makes sense.
No, she dies so young.
Yes.
So, but she's not big until the 50s. Bradbury becomes huge in the second half of the 1940s. And he maintains his position as like the great American author up until about 1962. But he doesn't die till 2012. But he's never able to capture that glory from about 1946 to 1962. He's the end-all, be-all of everything. And it's sad he didn't continue that. And I think there are reasons for that. But yeah, I would say O'Connor's next, right after that. And then probably after that, I don't know if maybe Wendell Berry. There could be a couple of people, Richard Ford, that I would say afterwards. Larry McMurtry. Some really serious, even Stephen King, when he's not being super dark, could be very good as well. Really good. But again, this is so when we're thinking about like truly respectable, innovative writers, Bradbury would be in that. So here's what I want to say about Bradbury. And so Bradbury loses his faith. Right? He never buys into the Baptist faith of his mom and dad. And you can imagine, I mean, Bradbury is truly one of the most imaginative persons that God has ever made. And so the kind of just, think about baptism, think about the Baptist faith, which is beautiful and orthodox, don't get me wrong, but we don't associate great art with Baptists, right? That's not how we think of it. You might with Eastern Orthodox or the Anglicans or the Lutherans, but you don't think of it with the Baptists. And so you can imagine that with someone like Bradbury, he was just, as a kid, he was kind of starved to death in a Baptist church because of the lack of imagery and other things. And yet he still comes to a kind of greater understanding of God when he's an adult. But it's not what we as Christians would recognize as God. God for Bradbury is much more of a kind of stoic God, not the logos per se, but a kind of eternal reason. And this is where Bradbury's a humanist, but he's not a Christian humanist. So Bradbury is utterly fascinated by the single manifestation of the individual. That is, he's a hardcore individualist, and he loves the creative person. He loves the creative entrepreneur, the creative artist, the creative writer. And he tends to think, and I know this is heretical, but he tends to think of man in his most creative as an expression of God. That's how he kind of looks at it. So I hesitate to end our semester on Bradbury only because he's not a Christian humanist, but he is an ally. He's a good and important ally in the fight. And you would never, for example, ever confuse Bradbury with the progressives, right, in any way, shape, or form. I mean, or Willa Cather, or Edgar Allan Poe, or Nathaniel Hawthorne. These are guys who write ultimately about sin and depravity. So they're not progressives at all. And so Bradbury does have he's a liberal when he's younger. He's not when he's older, but he's a liberal when he's younger, but he's not a leftist, if that makes sense. He's not a progressive at all, and comes to his favorite president is Ronald Reagan. So he's no progressive at all, but very interested in a kind of individualism that explores our humanity. Okay, so here's what I want to do. I just want to read to you, especially for those of you who have not read Bradbury, I want to give you a sense of the just joy of Bradbury's writing. And so I'm going to start with something dark. and then I'm going to end with something light. And then I hope you guys are still thinking about Canticle. Last thing we do today is just talk about why we did that and why we might think of that. Okay, here's Bradbury on October. That is the month of October and fall. And I first, just to be autobiographical for a moment, I first read Bradbury when I was in grade school. And we were assigned a short story that scared the you-know-what out of me. It's a short story about a little girl on Venus who had seen the sun once on Earth, but on Venus, the sun only appears every 7 years. And so they're waiting for the sun to appear, and this little girl tells the classmates, this is what you're going to see. It's the most gorgeous thing. And they don't believe her, and they lock her in a closet. And so she doesn't get to see the sun, and she dies from heartbreak. And I read that when I was in 5th grade, and I was just horrified, but I loved Bradbury. And so I devoured everything I could. And to this day, basically that was 50 years ago. I'm still reading him and loving him in every way. But this is what he says about October. And I will also admit October is my favorite month. Autumn is my favorite season. I love the smell of the air. I love the change of trees. All of that. It's just, for me, it's the perfect season. And I don't dwell on death, but every autumn I always think, oh, I hope this isn't my last autumn. I do feel that. I don't know why, but I always feel that in every autumn. So here's what he says. October. That country where it is always turning late in the year. That country where the hills are fog and the rivers are mist, where noons go quickly, dusks and twilights linger, and midnights stay. October is that country composed in the main of cellars, subcellars, coal bins, closets, attics, pantries, always faced away from the sun. October is that country whose people are autumn people, thinking only autumn thoughts, whose people passing at night on the empty walks sound like rain. I love that. It just, to me, captures exactly what October is. And you think about it, if you've ever been out on a beautiful night where the wind rushes and the leaves come down, it sounds like rain, right? There's just something so special about that. Okay, here's another description of October. That was The October Country, a series of short stories. This is the beginning of Bradbury's last great novel called Something Wicked This Way Comes from 1962, really the end of his great moment, so about 1946 to 1962. First of all, it was October, a rare month for boys. Not that all months aren't rare, but there be good and there be bad, as the pirates say. Take September, a bad month. School begins. Consider August, a good month. School hasn't begun yet. July's really fine. There's no chance in the world for school. And June, no doubting it. June's best of all. For school doors spring wide and September's a billion years away. But take October again. School's been on a month and you're riding easier in the range. You're jogging along. You've got time to think of the garbage you'll dump on Old Man Pritchard's porch and the hairy ape costume you'll wear to the YMCA the last night of the month. And if it's around October 20th and everything's smoky smelling and the sky orange and ash gray at twilight, it seems that October will never come in a fall of broomsticks and a soft flap of bed sheets around every corner. Right? Again, just a beautiful, beautiful invocation of what that is. And I don't know how many of you guys as kids got to celebrate Halloween, but the only thing better for me than Halloween was Christmas morning. Halloween was absolutely my favorite holiday. I love dressing up. I love going out with my friends. All of that. just beautiful, I think, for me. But now I want to switch to summer. And this is often regarded, thanks Jonathan, this is often regarded as Bradbury's finest work. I wouldn't put it up there. I think it's brilliant. But it's the story of a boy who turns 12 in the summer of 1928. And so it's called Dandelion Wine. It's a gorgeous reflection on what childhood is. And our main character is this 11-year-old on the verge of 12 by the name of Douglas Spalding. And so this is his first day of summer in 1928 and how he thinks of it. So this is going to be a little bit longer than what I just read to you guys, but I hope you like this. Again, to me, Bradbury absolutely captures what is best about summer and about childhood. It was a quiet morning, the town covered over with darkness and at ease in bed. Summer gathered in the weather. The wind had the proper touch. The breathing of the world was long, it was warm, and it was slow. You had only to rise, lean from your window, and know that this indeed was the first real time of freedom and of living. This was the first day of summer. Douglas Spalding, freshly wakened, led summer idle on in its early morning stream. Lying in his third-story cupola bedroom, he felt the tall power it gave him, riding high in the June wind, the grandest tower in town. At night, when the trees washed together, he flashed his gaze like a beacon from the lighthouse in all directions over swarming seas of elm and oak and maple. But now, boy, he whispered, a whole summer ahead to cross off the calendar day by day, like the goddess Silva in the travel books. He saw his hands jump everywhere, pluck sour apples, peaches, midnight plums. He would be clothed in trees and bushes and rivers. He would freeze gladly in the hoar-frosted icehouse door. He would bake happily with 10,000 chickens in Grandma's kitchen. But now it was a familiar task that awaited him. One night each week, he was allowed to leave his father and his mother and his younger brother Tom asleep in their small house next door. And here he could run away up the tall spiral stairs to his grandparents' third-floor cupola, and in this sorcerer's tower sleep with thunders and visions, and wake before the crystal jungle of milk bottles, and here he could perform his magic rituals. He stood at the open window in the dark. He took a deep breath and he exhaled. The street lights, the candles on a black cake, they all went out. He exhaled again, and the stars, one by one, began to vanish. Douglas smiled. He pointed a finger. There, now over here. Yellow squares were cut in the dim morning earth as house lights winked slowly on. A sprinkle of windows came suddenly alight, miles off in this dawn country. Everyone yawn! Everyone up! Douglas yelled. And the great house stirred below. Grandpa, get your teeth from the water glass! And then he waited a decent interval. Grandma and Grandpa, fry some hot cakes! The warm scent of fried batter rose in the drafty halls to stir the boarders, the aunts, the uncles, the visiting cousins, all in their bedrooms. Streets where all the old people live. Wake up! Miss Helen Loomis, Colonel Freelay, Miss Bentley, cough, get up, take your pills, move around. Mr. Jonas, hitch up your horse, get your junk wagon out, and get around. The bleak mansions across the town ravine opened baleful dragon eyes. Soon in the morning avenues below, two old women would glide their electric green machine. They would wave at all the dogs. Mr. Trident, run to the cardboard. Soon scattering hot blue sparks above it, the town trolley would sail the rivering brick streets. Ready, John Huff, Charlie Woodman, whispered Douglas to the streets of his childhood friends. Ready! To all the baseballs sponged deep in wet lawns and to the rope swings hung empty in their trees. Mom, Dad, Tom, get up! Clock alarms tinkled faintly. The courthouse clock boomed. Birds leapt from trees like a net thrown by his hand, singing. Douglas conducted his orchestra. and he pointed to the eastern sky, and right there the sun began to rise. He folded his arms, he smiled his magician smile. Yes, sir, he thought, everyone jumps, everyone runs when I yell. It's a fine season. He gave the town a last snap of his fingers. All the doors opened. All the people stepped out. The summer of 1928 had begun. Isn't that awesome? I love that. I think Bradbury just captures our imagination. So, okay, last thing, guys. Let's call it a semester. What about Canticle? And you're not going to hurt my feelings. So why did I assign it to you, and what does it tell us about this semester? Or what does it not tell us? Maria?
Yeah, I mean, I know we talked a lot last class about maybe different ways to kind of read it, but I think, like, on the positive side, like, I think we had talked about how, like, the monastery is kind of the thing that remains, like, most constant throughout the whole story, and I think, although they're like having these conversations about, like, what they're doing with, like, all of this knowledge that they've stored up and, like, how that should be, like, shared or reintroduced to the world.
Yeah.
I think you see that, that they have this role that they're playing in, like, the preservation of, what they can find as, like, the best of, like, human achievements and culture before, before so much was lost.
Yeah.
And so,
So is it
yeah.
kind of like, I mean, would you say this? Is it like the line we just had in Chesterton where we have to scour the grass again, right? And keep going, keep chalking the grass. Is that what they're doing, and is it worth it? Right? Is that
it
what
does
kind of
seem
what you're
like
thinking,
it
Maria?
relates to that, yeah.
Okay, good. Drew?
I was just scratching my ear, but
Sorry.
I have to say it just, to me, what stood out is just that man's nature doesn't really change over time, come with a cyclical history, but that's not necessarily a bad thing, because that there will always be people that try to help others. There will always be the church that survives and has an impact. And just because there's always going to be, like, a need for monasteries in the church, just provides more opportunities for love to grow.
Nicely put. Yeah, really nicely put. Good. Anybody else on this? And again, you guys aren't going to hurt my feelings at all. So please, feel free to be critical. There's a lot to be critical about in the book, and I recognize that.
You ask what it doesn't tell us. Does it not tell us of any second coming of Christ or any, like, finality? It just presents this sort of endless downward spiral.
Okay, yeah, that's a good point. And if we look at the monks leaving for Alpha Centauri, it seems that way. But there's this weird moment in it, Jonathan, and I didn't know if you guys caught this or not. It's a very strange moment. But you remember the baby, right? And what she says, I am the Immaculate Conception. And this is taken from the idea that she will birth the new Christ. That's what the second coming of Christ will come from Mrs. Grails. Even her name, Mrs. Grails, right? She's the Holy Grail. So Rachel is the new Mary who will birth the new Christ. So there is actually, I know it's odd and it's freaky because it's the nuclear, she's a mutant, but that's how. So it is, and actually in a very strange way, it does have a happy ending. We know, and this is Revelation 12, right? The dragon that devours the woman, or tries to, but she still gives birth. That's what's happening in that. And I didn't know if you guys had caught that or not. But it's very odd. But Miller does have a happy ending. But it's strange because we focus on the monks leaving for Alpha Centauri. And that, it seems like they're just going to start all over again. Right? So it does feel cyclical.
Yeah.
But, yeah. Does that kind of help, Jonathan,
It does.
at least?
I guess I should have expected.
No,
You can't
no,
blame me for
it's an
not
odd.
expecting to see an immaculate conception in a mutant, but
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, it's truly odd. There's no question about that. It's truly odd. But I think from Miller's perspective, it had a very. And did you guys notice he dedicates the book to Mary? I don't know if you guys caught that, but that's who his dedication is to. And so he definitely had a very strong devotion. Whatever his own strangenesses were, he definitely had a strong devotion to Mary and all of that. So it ends on a very Marian note. Okay, anybody else on this? Thank you.
I could speak to kind of the, we talked about Dawson and kind of the primacy of culture. And I just think you see the monastery as a cultural kind of institution that is satisfied with the fact that it is only a cultural institution and is not going to like seek a political solution like we discussed, and can't seek a political solution.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, I just think that speaks to the idea that, and also just the fact that they don't know. I mean, I think you see the reality of they probably have a sense that what they're doing, they're not going to be completely in control of how that knowledge is used, and whether for good or for ill, but they're still confident that that's a worthwhile endeavor, and that there is that kind of harmony, obviously, between their faith and the humanities, but also just, I mean, I do think it's hopeful because I think they see themselves as, it's a very humble vision of them existing independently of politics and them kind of maintaining hope that, even though sin and like destruction is present in the world, that their role there is still very meaningful. And like it's in the same way that Ballad, you don't really know what the outcome is going to be, but you just trust that you're in the right place and you can only do so much. Like it's not up to you to see the kind of long-term destination of all of your efforts and your
That's
endeavors.
frustrating, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. So like you could have a very cynical view of that, and I think you see that there is this kind of recurring sort of suffering, and it's definitely not a vision of like, okay, we're dead. I mean, yes, there's the Immaculate Conception at the end, but it's obviously not a kind of arc of history where they have like, oh, we know that this is gonna just get better. It could get much worse. Anyway, so I think there's just a lot going on there with how we've described throughout this semester how the Christian humanist sees his role in the world, what he does and what he does not do, and what his obligations are.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah. Well put. Good. Anybody else on this? Okay. Well, I want to end us with this. I just give me 2 minutes here. I want to read to you from Eliot, and I don't know if you guys. There's no reason you would have brought your books today, but if you did, I'm on page 108, and I want to read what is actually a little depressing, but I want to try and challenge that. And just to kind of tie everything together, we've been talking about this semester. This is from Eliot wrote, so you guys know, I mean, I think I told you this, the moment he wrote those final lines of Little Gidding, that was it. He never wrote poetry again, ever, the rest of his life, right? Even though he's alive for another 20 some years after that, he never writes another line because he thinks that he has, and I don't disagree with him, he's done everything he can. He's reached the top of his poetic profession. He has said what he needs to say, and the 4 quartets tell us what we need to know. But he did write a number of plays after that, and one of the plays he wrote, and the title is very telling, it's called The Rock. And it's about the church. There's no question about that. But what he does, and I love this about Eliot, in The Rock, he still writes poetry, but it's not formal poetry. He puts it in the mouth of the chorus. And so if you think about Greek tragedies, they always had choruses. Eliot does the same thing. He gives them choruses, and then he'll often, when they're staged, there'll be men in overalls and working men who come out and do the chorus, so the kind of modern Greek chorus. But in The Rock, this is what he says. This is what the chorus sings. And so this is what I want to end with us today, but I want to challenge Eliot on this too. But it seems that something has happened that has never happened before, though we know not just when or why or how or where. Men have left God not for other gods, they say, but for no God. And this has never happened before. That men both deny gods and worship gods. After all, they profess reason, or money, or power, or what they call life, or race, or dialectic. The church has been disowned, the tower overthrown, the bells upturned, and what have we to do but stand with empty hands and palms turned upwards in an age which advances progressively backward? It's beautiful, but it's really bleak. And I hope that one of the things that we've all learned this semester, not only from the various people we've read and the stories we've read, just talking to one another, me talking to each of you, you talking to each of the other people of this room, and us just talking as a class. We are words. We are not the word, but we are little words, and we share that. And there are times when it's frustrating, and there are times we walk out into the world and it seems that everybody's against us. Get on Twitter, get on Facebook, and man, the vitriol, the anger, the division is just so brutal everywhere. But what are we to do? I don't think we are just supposed to stand with palms turned upward and ask, why do we live in an age that advances progressively backwards? We're here to love one another. And that means sometimes it's a minor word here or there. Sometimes that's 20 minutes of your time when you don't think you have the time to give to somebody. Sometimes it means giving $20 to the homeless man and you don't know if you're getting scammed or not. It's worth giving that $20 to the homeless man, even if you just totally got taken advantage of. Doesn't matter. You did the right thing, even if it didn't help in that situation. So we are constantly, in every moment of our life, we are called to do the right thing. And every moment of our life, we get to choose between good and evil. And through God's grace, we can always choose good. So if there's anything you guys take away from this semester, that's what I hope you take away. Not just that we are made in God's image, but that God took on our image and died for us. There's no greater truth than that. Nothing better than that. He is our King. Okay, thank you guys. So this has been a great semester.